My name is Jacob MacKay. I live in Providence, Rhode Island now, but I'm from New Hampshire. Um, let's see. I don't know how far back you want me to go. It's like
Well, embryo is perhaps a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I grew up in sort of an absurdly large family, all of whom were musicians, except all my siblings are musicians. Um, so that was always a huge part of my upbringing. It was a big part of my life, but I never really considered it as a career choice. I was always sort of interested in a lot of different things, and then I ended up going to my undergrad was at Brandeis, and I majored in environmental studies. And at that point, I was interested in like climate change and different things having to do with all that stuff. uh, and I sort of got to my junior year and realized that was depressing. It was like it was hard to imagine spending. I mean, it's very important work, but spending 40 hours a week thinking about the end of the world is sort of tough going. So I thought about what I liked most to do, and that was to play chamber music. And so I added a music major, and yeah, the rest. That I ended up going to grad school, and here I am.
Mhm. And you're still at Brandeis?
No, I did my graduate or master's degree at Rice,
Hmm.
and now I work for a nonprofit called the Newport String Project. And it's sort of a resident string quartet, and we run a teaching program too. So yeah,
Excellent.
lots to do.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, why don't you talk a little bit about how music fits into your life as it exists now, why it's important, and what the things are you're trying to do with your music.
Uh, well, these days it's important just to sort of get through the day. I feel like, like as the world is sort of crumbling, it's nice to have some sort of art form to fall back on, I think. Um, but I think there's definitely uh, a social justice bent to what at least I try and do, and especially the work at the nonprofit tries to do. Um, I think you can sort of develop a really unique voice and amplify voices that don't often get amplified in terms of composers or certain audiences you want to reach. So I think there's a lot of really good work that you can use music to affect people in some way. And yeah.
How does the Newport String Project operate in that way with what you just described?
Well, so the teaching side of the organization, it's a fully funded program. So the students are mainly low income or minority students, and they all get free lessons and free group classes and free instruments, and they have their own sort of event calendar. Um, and on the performing side, it's we really try and have every program be not just dead old white guys.
Mhm.
It's definitely, I know this isn't a novel idea, but there's a big focus on every program having women and people of color represented in terms of the pieces that we play.
I was wondering if you might be willing to share something that's really important to you that's not musical, that's part of your life.
These days, it's probably cooking. I've, like a lot of people, my culinary skills have, it's sort of been trial by fire during a pandemic.
Not
So,
literally by fire if you're cooking.
well, you'd be surprised.
Oh dear.
uh, I'm happy to report that I've conquered my fear of yeast. So yeah, there's been a lot of bread eating.
That's good.
So I would say bread eating is a passion of mine. It's probably not the answer you were looking for, but
What's really important to you in today's world? You're a young person, you've got, this future ahead of you, and I'm just sort of interested in what is important to you.
Well, I guess in terms of issues that affect everyone, I'm sort of a political nerd, but I'm very into climate change as a subject that I worry about.
Is there anything particular about climate change that you've sort of you've been active in?
When I was in school, I tended to focus more on the effects of climate change in the ocean because the land, since we live here, it's so people talk about it all the time, and I think a huge percentage of the world is not where we live, and it's easy to have that be forgotten in the conversation. So that, and what was weird is I always thought that these two subjects, music and environmental studies, or music and climate change, were totally incompatible fields, and they didn't relate to each other. At least in terms of the classes that you take in school, at least they're not related at all. But in sort of the real world, and there are so many cultures out there that have their own specific musical traditions that are totally linked to their environments. So in fact, it's interesting to discover that there is quite a lot of overlap in those fields. So.
Sure. Yeah, and I would even say that there's sort of a rediscovering or reconnecting with environment and musicking in contemporary art music.
Right.
Well, great. Thank you so much for taking this time to have a conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks so much.